When the king Johann invaded Turkey, he heard news about a man named Martin who lived in Akşehir. He went there and set a camp. He sent a company of soldiers to invite Martin to go to the camp. But Martin thought that the king would kill anybody he met. So, he refused the invitation. The king realized that Martin did not want to see him soon. Then, he sent a battalion of army to force him to come to the camp. Martin was very afraid. He said, "Okay, I'm coming soon." The army went back and reported to the king that Martin would come soon. The king waited for him for several hours. Unfortunately, Martin did not come yet. The king lost his temper. He jumped onto his horse and rode to Martin's house. The people who knew that the king was coming cried out, "Martin, hurry up. The king comes here." Martin put on his clothes quickly and walked to the camp. When he turned right at very narrow road, the king also arrived there. The horse was very frightened by his sudden coming. It jumped so high that made the king fell down from its back. The king was very angry and commanded his soldiers to arrest Martin. "Why do you arrest me?" asked Martin. "You will be hung in the city square. You may hurt the king," answered the soldier. "Bring me to the king first," said Martin. The soldiers brought him to the king. Martin asked, "What is my fault so that I should be punished?" "You bring a bad luck for me," answered the king. "Your Majesty, who brings a bad luck, your Majesty or me?" asked him. "If I bring a bad luck to your Majesty, of course, your Majesty has fallen down and died. If it were so, it would be fair to punish me. But it is your Majesty that brings a bad luck to me." "How can you say that?" asked the king. Martin answered, "The proof is when your Majesty met me, I will be punished. So, I don't think that I bring bad luck." The king thought that Martin was right. He decided to forgive him. Before he let Martin go, he asked a question, "Say, Martin, am I a tyrant or an educated man?" Martin answered, "Your Majesty is neither a tyrant nor an educated man. We, the people, are the tyrants, so God sends your Majesty to punish us." The king was very happy with the answer and let Martin go. Several months later the fruit season came. Martin said to his wife, "Let's pick some ripe figs and present them to the king." They went to the garden and started to pick some figs. His wife saw that the pears were also ripe. She said, "Martin, see, the pears are also ripe. Let's pick some too and present them to the king." "No, just do what I ask you to do," answered Martin. Some minutes later, his wife saw an apple tree which was rich with big and fresh apples. She said, "See the apple. They are good for the king, let's pick some of them. They are better than figs." Martin answered, "No, just pick what I ask you to do." At last, they got a basket full of ripe figs. The next day, Martin brought them to the king. "Please sit down," said the king. Then he opened the basket. He was angry that the fruits were only figs, the very cheap and not delicious fruits. He took the figs and threw Martin with them one by one until nothing was left in the basket. Martin lifted his face and saw the king. He murmured, "Thank God." The king was wondering why Martin thanked God after being thrown with a basket full of figs. He asked, "Why do you thank God?" Martin answered, "Your Majesty, I thank God because I have done what I thought." The king was curious. He asked further, "What have you thought?" "Your Majesty, this morning when my wife and I were picking these figs, my wife suggested that we should also pick the pears and apple for your Majesty. I thought that we shouldn't. I thought that we should present your Majesty the soft ripe figs instead of the apple and pears. I thank God because I didn't do what my wife had suggested." If I did my wife's suggestion to pick the apples and pears, of course, I would have lost my head now.